How do you select any professional advisor? Welcome to Tea at Taxevity, where you get insights from insiders, our many clients and friends. I'm Pramod Sharma, your actuary at Taxevity. I help people who care about sustainable financial independence harness the power of life and health insurance. Our guest today is Larry Tomlin. Larry, what do you do when you're not being interviewed?
Most people think of me as an accountant. I'm actually now in the investment management business most of the time. But I certainly spend all of my time advising families about financial matters, whether it be tax or investments or estates or other things, other problems they bring to me.
What do you mean by a professional advisor? Can you give us examples?
Well, for the topic today, I was thinking of generically a wide variety of professional advisors. Most advisors probably fit into one of two categories. One of them are routine people that you see on a regular basis, your doctor, your dentist that you go to all of the time. Chances are you're developing a long-term relationship. You're going to have that same one. Accountants are very much like that, for those of us who have an accountant help us with our taxes, or if you run a business, because you're probably not going to change accountants too often. You'll have a routine relationship with that person for a long period of time. There are other times when you're in choosing an advisor for a one-off. A real estate agent because you're buying a house, a lawyer because you're getting divorced. There's some other event that drives somebody you need for this one moment and maybe not.
You hope the divorce is a one-off.
Yes, I'm hoping you don't get divorced every year.
Where do we start our search for a professional advisor?
Most people in experience start with what's familiar. If you're uncertain about who to choose, you look for other people who've already made those choices that you may be familiar with. So, there's a chance to you need a good real estate agent. You might hear from, your sister's hairdresser or somebody are familiar with. I would argue that familiarity itself, while it might put you a little bit at ease, probably isn't sufficient.
And why is that?
You want to be sure that the advisor has experience that is relevant to your particular case. You want to be sure that you are a typical client for that particular advisor. Some people will say, well, I'll go to that accountant over there because he's my brother-in-law's accountant, and my brother-in-law, I think, is filthy rich, so he must be a brilliant accountant.
Because on the surface, that sounds like a good strategy.
I would urge a little bit of caution against that. Your needs may not be the same as your brother-in-law, and your brother-in-law probably isn't as rich as you think. I've certainly been in that position as an accountant for many years. When people would come to me, they would say, oh, you're Charlie's accountant, and he tells me about all the things he gets away with, and I have to bite my tongue because I know what Charlie's circumstances really are.
Okay.
And often the story's not the same.
Okay. What about the importance of credentials?
Relevant experience probably matters more than credentials, but credentials do definitely matter as well. Credentials tell you that someone has appropriate training, and more importantly, they tell you that there's somebody you could complain to.
What do you complain to?
Well, if something goes wrong and you're unhappy with what has happened, is there someone that you could complain to?
So do you mean a regulatory body or
a regulatory body? Do they have errors and omissions insurance, for example? Do they have a disciplinary board that you could register a complaint with? That matters. Not that you're likely to make a complaint, but the fact that that person has a level of professionalism and accountability really does matter. It's also important to know that they're held to a specific standard of some sort. What is the standard that they are judged by? And that is also part of the who would I complain to as well. Are they a lawyer? You certainly want to be sure that they really are a licensed lawyer, and you could complain to the Law Society.
Right.
And knowing that they're held to the standard that the Law Society expects of lawyers is important. There are occasions where you might use a paralegal as well, but that is the standard, and that's where credentials matter.
You've also told me prior to starting the recording, which is why I know how to ask some of these things, that the physical location is also important. What do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes people use physical location for as sort of a proxy for making some other decision. If you're unsure about how to decide, you'll decide to just go to somebody who's physically convenient for you in some way. Or you may be very impressed with the fancy office they have or the prestigious address of their office.
Right.
And those things do, the physical location and how fancy the office is, that is a signal for you, but you have to be sure that you're using that signal appropriately.
Okay, and what's the right way to use that signal?
Well, be aware that the fancier the office, the more expensive the office, what that really tells you about is what is their overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And that is probably going to be reflected in their fees in some way or another. If somebody has an office on the second floor of a suburban plaza, and another alternative that you have is someone who has an office at a glittering office tower in the financial district, the chances are one's going to be charging less than the other.
Right.
Which is not to say that you always go to the professional with the dingiest office, but you do want to go to someone who's appropriate to your level. Somebody with a higher overhead probably has a higher degree of specialization. Mm-hmm. Do you really need a specialist for this particular case? If it is the routine sale of a home, just like hundreds of other homes being sold on that particular day, maybe you don't need a highly specialized lawyer with the fanciest office you can think of.
Mm-hmm. And maybe if you're after something which is routine, then maybe you want someone who is closer to where you are rather than having to travel and travel.
That's true, although increasingly with electronic communications, traveling doesn't matter. Many of the accountants I work with tell me that they don't meet their clients all that often anymore, and the clients don't come to their offices. You meet in the early stages when you need to, but as the relationship becomes more routine, phone calls, e-meetings, scanned documents being transmitted back and forth, Skype calls, all work very well. And people are physically going into their accountant's offices, at least, less and less.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
It also should be remembered that some professionals are expected to come to you, particularly real estate agents is one. And there are some that who never come to you, like doctors never make house calls.
Yeah, they used to when I was a kid, but that's a long time ago.
You're betraying our ages from
Sorry, let me say, I heard that it used to be done for children many years ago.
It did happen for me as a child.
And it did happen for me too. It was a lot more convenient, definitely.
Yeah, not going to happen these days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's look at a case study to help us understand professional advisors better. Let's look at the world of financial advisors.
Well, financial advisors are probably the toughest case.
That's why we're using them as our case study.
Yes, I would think so, because a financial advisor certainly falls into the routine category. Chances are, if you hire a financial advisor, you're going to be with that person for a very long period of time. Mm-hmm. People don't change all that often. And once they've been with one person, they tend to stick with them for a very long period of time. That said, you're probably going to go to a financial advisor because there's some event going on. Maybe you're buying or selling a house, or there's a bit of death in the family, or somebody's getting married, or you're selling a business, or you're receiving an inheritance. Usually there's some sort of event that drives your initial engagement, and that becomes a long-term relationship. The problem with financial advisors, with choosing a financial advisor, is that there are really very low barriers to entry. The world is awash, it seems, in people willing to provide financial advice, mm-hmm. Usually for free. They don't tell you what's in it for them. And there's no single standard for credentials. There are many confusing letters that financial advisors put after their names, and it's hard to figure out which credentials really matter.
Mm-hmm. So if we don't know what credentials matter, are there other signs that we can use that we're dealing with an intelligent person?
I would certainly look among the letters after their name, and chances are there'll be quite a few.
Right.
Look to see if any of them is actually a university degree.
Why would that matter?
Well, there are an awful lot of credentials which are unique to the investment industry, which are relatively easy to obtain. And it's relatively easy for someone who doesn't actually have a depth of education themselves to get a bunch of letters after their name.
Okay.
So you can get things that nobody recognizes, but just by the sheer weight of there being so many letters, people feel it may have to make some. So look to see if there's an actual degree in there. Another thing to look for is a professional qualification outside of the investment industry, and particularly to see if they actually have an accounting designation. Being a CPA matters, and it means that they have a depth of education outside just the investment industry.
Okay, let's explore the kinds of credentials that a financial advisor should have. First of all, let's look at the world of insurance.
Here I think the topic really is beyond credentials, the issue of how people are regulated. And that's one of the questions you should definitely ask when choosing any advisor, period, and a financial advisor particularly, is what are their credentials? Yes. How are they being paid?
Okay.
Right? And how are they regulated?
Okay.
Now, I'll address the regulated because that is related to how they're getting paid. And you're right, many insurance professionals regulated by the insurance industry are also in the business of providing investment advice. What usually means they're selling an investment product, and if they are only an insurance regulated professional, then they are restricted to offering investments that are offered by insurance companies.
Right, so segregated funds would be an example.
Segregated funds is a very good example, and segregated funds are entirely appropriate for some people. They're a little more expensive usually than other types, but if your investment professional is an insurance field regulated person alone, then that's the only kind of investment they're going to be able to sell you.
Yes.
And you need to be aware of the old aphorism that to a carpenter, all problems look like a nail, right? So to someone whose only kit that they have to give you is an insurance-related product, they're going to find some reason why that insurance-related product is ideally suited to you. But there are three other categories that exist.
Okay.
One of them is mutual fund dealers, MFDA dealers.
Okay.
And there are a great many work for the banks. You'll find mutual fund salespeople within banks, within certain chain organizations that operate from storefronts and on the main street of every town you go to.
And sometimes insurance people will also be able to sell mutual funds.
Correct.
I mean, they got that registration.
Yes, so you can have people who do both.
Yes.
At the same time. That's fairly common. But again, mutual funds, if mutual funds are quite appropriate for many people, they do tend to have hidden costs that are in them. And there is a sales commission structure that supports the distribution of those.
Right.
So absolutely, if you're using someone who is primarily regulated by the Mutual Fund Dealers Association, then they are a salesperson selling mutual funds, and you should be well aware that that's the context of the relationship.
Okay, so we've got insurance, we've got mutual funds. What's beyond that?
The next step is what are called IIROC, financial advisors. Most of those work for a bank of some kind. They're of the 6 big banks in Canada. Each one of them has an investment brokerage arm. So Bank of Montreal has BMO Nesbitt Burns, Bank of Nova Scotia has Scotia McLeod. All of them have an IIROC dealer who is part of their... Now, traditionally, they do deal with investors who have a little more money to invest, and there may be a greater degree of sophistication that's expected of them. And they do have a wider kit of things to provide. So they're not restricted to just insurance products or just mutual funds. They can also advise on individual stocks, structured products, many kinds of more sophisticated things. And they certainly have a wider range of things to offer you.
So I've heard of those 3 categories, but you are actually in a 4th category, portfolio manager. What's that about?
A portfolio manager is a completely different animal. And they are different in several respects. First of all, a portfolio management firm is likely to be a fairly small firm. I believe there are 200 portfolio management firms in Ontario, and most of them are privately owned and sometimes controlled by a single family, typically, perhaps. Portfolio managers are regulated directly by the government. The other three areas, insurance, mutual funds, and IIROC, are all what are called self-regulating organizations. Some people refer to that as the fox being in charge of the henhouse.
Right.
Portfolio managers are regulated directly by the Ontario Securities Commission,
Okay.
which is a degree of direct government regulation, which I happen to think gives us a little bit of an advantage in the marketplace. That means that we adhere to the standard the government provides, and that is a fiduciary standard.
What's your main message for the people watching today?
The main message is pick an advisor carefully, make sure that you're a typical client of that person, that they're well qualified, convenient for you, and well regulated. And most importantly, how are they being paid?
Thanks very much for dropping by.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Tea at Taxevity. The Taxevity Insurance Advisory helps you understand insurance and bridges gaps in your coverage. There's no premium for peace of mind. How healthy is your insurance?